Good morning, all. It is with great pleasure I introduce Professor Jagat Manatunga. Jagat Manatunga is a professor attached to the Department of Civil Engineering, University of Moratuwa. He has a BSc Honours First Class degree in Civil Engineering from the University of Moratuwa and an MSc and a Diploma in Environmental Technology from Imperial College, University of London, and a doctoral degree from Saitama University, Japan. He is the chartered engineer, and he is currently the editor of the annual transactions of the IESL, a member of the editorial boards of the Journal of National Science Foundation and the IESL. And also he has received many outstanding research awards from the University of Moratuwa and Presidential Awards for Research. He has received the prestigious CVCD Excellence Award in 2020 for Most Outstanding Senior Researcher in Technology and Related Sciences, including engineering, architecture, quantity surveying, and information technology. So, dear sir, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Manti. That long introduction. I'm flattered. But I don't know where you found this information from. But anyway, thank you very much. Yeah, let us start the presentation. I'll start the presentation. I'm very glad to share the presentation slides with you. I can transfer the presentation slides at the end of the presentation to the IESL. They might post it on the web so that you can download it, right? So how to conduct a comprehensive literature review. Now you have to understand that this is about literature review, right? Conducting a comprehensive literature review and subsequently to write it, right? Because you don't do any literature review just for fun. You have some objective of doing this, probably for your writing a research paper, a conference paper, or a thesis, or a technical report, whatever it is. Subsequent to literature search, you need to do the review and then to start the write-up, right? So we will discuss about all these three aspects in this lecture: literature search, literature review, and how to write the outcomes of the review, outcomes of the survey, then the review, and how the review should be put into a piece of comprehension or writing a write-up, right? With that brief note, let me go to the next slide. So literature review, first let us try to define what literature review is. We are looking at parts of the paper where there is extensive reference to related research in your field, right? It is where connections are made between the source text and that you draw on, and where you position yourself and your work amongst the others. There are three things that you need to understand here. Literature review is part of the paper where there is extensive reference to research in your field, right? You need to refer to other researchers in where they have published, and where the published work is part of the literature domain that you have in databases, and you need to make connections of what you are doing and position yourself in your work among others, right? So you have very basic elements to understand here, right? So there are three things I want to emphasize here. Extensive reference to existing literature, right? So the first part is here, extensive reference to the existing literature. But most importantly, you need to make connections to existing sources so that you position yourself, your work amongst the others, right? This is what you need to do in literature review. Otherwise, it becomes a summary of literature. If you just read the literature, go through what others have done, others have written, and if you just copy and paste or repeat what they are doing, It's just a summary of literature. It's not a review, right? To do a review, you need to go through references extensively, any publications which are related to your research, and make connections. You need to make connections, right? Why do you need to make connections? To make sure that you position your work amongst others, right? You may be doing some original work, but still there should be some background for your study, right? This background is the reference that you make extensively to previous research. So you have to understand this. It's not just a summary, right? So you need to understand very clearly that literature review is not just a summary of sources. Don't ever make that mistake, right? So, but in most cases, even very experienced researchers might just do a summary without a summary of sometimes a grouping of very broad, unrelated sources, and compiling everything that has been written on a particular topic. Don't just criticize what others have done. Don't just compare what others have done, but put what your context into others, right? You have to place what you are doing within the criticism that you make, or comparison that you make, or compilation that you make, or summary that you make. Without your work inserted into these summaries, it will not become a review, right? But you don't have to specifically insert what you are doing, but you should have the intention to develop arguments, for example, to develop theories, to develop background information for your study. In that case, you have an argument, you have a style of writing where you do the review so that it culminates in or ends up in a position where you can connect that write-up or the review to your work, right? That is important to understand. Now, literature is a literature review is an integrated analysis. Therefore, it's not just a summary of any scholarly writing. So it's an integrated analysis, not just a summary. Scholarly writings that are related directly to your research. You have to make that direct connection when you summarize whatever you find in research, whatever you read, and whatever that you gather, and whatever that you summarize and synthesize. Relate that to your research, right? It should represent the literature that provides background information on your topic, which shows correspondence between those writings and your research question. You need to understand this very, very carefully. At preliminary steps or preliminary phases of your research, preliminary stages of your research, you might just be doing some general reading to familiarize yourself with the background, the already conducted research. That's okay. I don't want to confuse with reading, summarizing, and conducting the review. You need to read first, and you need to summarize the information before, without which you can't do any analysis of what you have read, right? That is the integrated analysis that you need to do to relate what you have read, what you have found in the past literature to what you are doing. Right, and your aim right from the beginning, right from the inset, should be to find a correspondence between the previous writing and synthesizing that into one coherent whole, so that you address your research question. You relate what others have done to what you are planning to do, or what you are doing, or what you have already done, right? Even subsequent to your studies, still you can refer to a previous literature. Say, for example, if you want to make any extensions to your research, or if you want to do any meaningful discussion of your results, once you obtain the results, then you need to refer to literature, right? So your focus would be to get the connection between what others have done, what others have said about the research, what others have written about the research, and connect that to your work, right? Literature review may be a standalone work, or it can just be the introduction of a larger research paper, depending on the assignment, right? A stand-alone work, to give you an example. Now, this is a standalone literature review. This is on health effects of beryllium literature review. So this paper is about 109 pages long. This is entirely on literature review, right? So this is not a summary. That's what I want to focus on. It is a review. It is not just a summary of what others have done. This paper, some say, gives a long description of what others have done. It is first a summary of what others have done, a synthesis, and then subsequently a review of what others have done to interpret the results in a meaningful way, right? So it gives an introduction, exposure assessment, chronic diseases and things like that, and the assessment of health effects and so on, right? I'm not going to details of this report, but I want to emphasize that a literature review itself can be a very long report, something like this, right? Or else it can be just a summary of an introduction of a research paper, right? What am I referring to? I'm sorry, just a moment. Bandhan. Right, okay. Yeah, there's a commenter that I'm talking too fast about the others. Others can somebody comment? Am I too fast? Okay. Right. Okay. Good. There's a consensus now. Yeah, speed is okay. Right. Now, this is what I want to again emphasize. Now, the literature review can be part of a journal paper or a conference paper or a short piece of writing, right? Say, for example, in the introduction, you can refer to previous publications. And the introduction of the paper can, of course, include a literature review by its own, right? So it is just a summary of what others have done. The author would try to give a summary of the existing knowledge, just a summary of existing knowledge, right? Or else, without even giving a summary as a summary form in a paper, the author might decide to present it in the introduction in a different way, rather than writing down a subtopic to introduce the rather than just saying that it's an introduction. The author might use the previous literature extensively in the introduction to make arguments. Can you see this? The whole, yeah, I think there's a delay. Okay, now the author might decide to give a full synthesis of what others have done in the past, in a way that is inherent to the authors, the writing style, but there can be extensive reference to the previous publications. Now, for example, right from the first sentence, the authors are referring the writing to the previous work, right? And there can be arguments set so that they will be looking at other arguments as well from the literature. Just with those very broad examples, may I go to the presentation again? Right now, so the literature review can be a standalone work, as I showed you the report that I showed you about health effects of beryllium, or the introduction for the two examples that I showed you, an introduction in the large research paper. And also, if you are working on a thesis, there can be a separate chapter on literature review, where it also can be a standalone work, but still you will have references to, you will have citations, or you will use past literature extensively in your introduction part, as well as interpretation of your results in the results and discussion part as well, right? So the literature review comes everywhere, at every stage of your research, which you cannot escape from, right? So the literature review should survey scholarly sources on a specific topic. It should provide an overview of current knowledge. It should point out gaps in existing research. And also it should appear as part of your article or your thesis or your book chapter, whatever that you are proposing. The literature review, therefore, should survey the scholarly sources. Right? This slide is important. These four keywords are important here. And second, the literature review provides an overview of the current status, as I mentioned, of the topic by analyzing and evaluating the relevant studies. You need to analyze and evaluate the studies to give an overview, and then pointing out gaps. This is very important. Without pointing out gaps, you cannot define your research problem. You cannot find a research need, right? So you have to look at what's already known, right? To seek to point out what is not yet unknown, right? So if you can focus on what is not known as yet, then you can justify that your research will contribute to the advancement of knowledge. And thereby you can, first you have to identify a research need, then you formulate a research question, and then you provide justification for conducting the study. So literature review, without a proper literature review, you might not be able to see, to decide whether the topic has studied before extensively or poorly, right? So if it is poorly studied, or if something is unknown, you need to identify based on the literature review. And the past literature would give you concrete evidence that such similar studies may not have conducted in the past. And then the last, literature review can appear as part of a dissertation, and a thesis or a research paper or a proposal. As we saw, it can be part of a long piece of research, but you need to ensure that you have a thorough understanding of the existing research in your area before carrying out your research, before embarking on your research, and therefore reading past work, going through them, summarizing them, and finally trying to synthesize the reports by way of a review is very important. Right? A literature review is important because it explains the background of your research, right? That's why you need some information from the past literature to compile your introduction part of your thesis or your research paper, right? Or your research report or your technical report, whatever it is. And you need to demonstrate why the topic is significant, because the examiners of your thesis might be looking at the significance of your research, the originality of your research. Right, and the reader might also be looking at why is this research important? Why is it so important for me to go through? Right, so you have to demonstrate why it is significant by referring to the previous studies and placing your ideas in context of others, what the others have done. And you need to discover relationships between research studies and ideas so that you can make connections. Right, what you are doing with what you are doing with yeah, I think you have to stop texting. Please don't use chat box unless otherwise you need to use it. So some are complaining that it's very distracting. Yeah, it's distracting for me as well. please stop these unwanted chatting, right? If you want to get registered yourself, you have to do it before attending this lecture, right? Please refrain from texting, unless otherwise you have a question to ask or a question to discuss, right? Please don't make these distractions. Now, these I don't know whether these participants can understand English. Malindu, Havindu, please stop texting. Right, and the literature review is important again, then, because it identifies main themes, concepts, and researchers on a particular topic. Because the readers might find it very important to go through the literature review written by others to get a summary of what the related topic. And the literature review also identifies critical gaps and points disagreements. This finding critical gaps is very important to define the research problems, the research question, the research need. And also, say, highlighting points of disagreement is also very important in the advancement of a particular topic, particular field of study, without which, without a critical assessment of past studies, and without a critical assessment of what you have observed, I mean, there's no point in doing research, because we are doing research because of the curiosity that we have to generate new knowledge. For that, these disagreements are not arguments that you make. Disagreements are a basis for further research, right? So literature review should be aimed at finding critical gaps and to find any disagreements between studies, among studies, and also what you are also doing. And finally, the literature review will discuss further research questions, which comes out logically from your explanations, your demonstrations, from your discoveries, your identification of the past themes, concepts, and researches. And after you identify the critical gaps and the points to disagree with, you can discuss further research. That is how you carry on with the research work, the advancement of the area of study that you are doing. So therefore, to summarize the purpose of doing the research, you need to demonstrate familiarity. The literature review allows you to demonstrate familiarity with your topic and the scholarly literature concerning it, right? You have to engage with the work of others, right? You have to keep on finding research and then read them and engage yourself with what others have done. Try to understand what others have done as a key part of your academic research, right? So it can be at the preliminary stage, it can be at the beginning of your research, it can be at the middle of your research, it can be at the end of your program, right? Literature review is a continuous process. You can't say that I have finished my literature review. No. Even during the conclusion, writing of the conclusion of your thesis or a paper, still you will have to refer to literature, right? So literature is a never-ending process that you do. Even after publications, even after graduation, you still have to keep on reading, summarizing, and synthesizing the findings of others, right? So you need to understand that literature survey, reading, after finding the relevant literature, is part of the academic research and writing. Even not only academic, even for professionals, it's very, very important that you have developed your research skills. So the first step in developing research skills is to familiarize with what others have done on the topic. So demonstrate familiarity is very important for any researcher, for any professional, without which you will never become a good researcher. So you need to demonstrate familiarity with a particular topic by way of doing a literature survey, literature search, finding relevant literature, reading them, and then making connections. Right. Then the second, as part of a larger research project, the literature review will also inform the development of theoretical frameworks and methodology. When you read what others have done, when you go through what others have done, you will understand what type of research frameworks that they have adopted, what methodology that they have adopted, right? So then you can develop your own methodology. You can improve on what others have done, right? So you will get to know and also to assess advantages and disadvantages of doing some research in a way that you have in mind. And then you can refine it, you can modify it, you can revise what you have in mind and carry on with your work. The past literature will provide you lots of guidance to form your own approach, right? And the third, to position your approach in relation to the others. You know that part of this part of doing literature is positioning yourself to other researchers, right? Your literature review will provide you a very clear indication of your own place in relation to other researchers. Whether it's with the title that you have chosen, that the area that you are carrying on with, whether it's worth doing at all, right? And then you can, when position yourself within others, you can inform yourself, your supervisor, your group that you are working with, whether you can satisfy with your methods, whether you can satisfy with your approach, and whether there are any disagreements that you have identified. Then once you have all these, when you have demonstrated familiarity, when you have developed a theoretical framework and position yourself, then you can identify a gap in the research. And that's why you are going to conduct the research after all. It's very important that all academic and professional research or technical studies demonstrate that it contributes something new and worthwhile doing it. Repetitions are allowed always if you want to refine methods, for example, right? So with that introduction, therefore, to give you a summary of literature review, it surveys scholarly sources, and it provides an overview of the current state of knowledge on a topic by analyzing and evaluating relevant studies, and points out gaps in existing research, as well as looking at what's already known. It will seek to point out what is not yet unknown or what isn't yet known, right? There is gaps of existing research. Once you identify gaps in an existing research, it's easy for you to define your own research question and then your objectives, the aim and objectives. And this is the justification of your, say, once you find the gap, it provides a justification for your research, right? And finally, a literature review can appear as part of your article or research article or a dissertation or a technical proposal, whatever it is, or a standalone assignment. It is as part of a longer piece of research. The literature review is there to ensure that you have a thorough understanding of the existing research, right? You have to demonstrate this, that you have a thorough understanding of the existing literature, research before you embark on your research. And also, finally, the literature review will provide you with a general evaluation of the state of the research on the topic that you have in choice, and you can place some importance of what you are planning to do in the context of advancement of what you are doing. And therefore, to give you a summary, where do you conduct a literature review? You have to do a literature search here, right? To choose a topic. You have to do a literature review here, right? To find a research gap, and then to construct aim and hypothesis for your study. Once you have aims and hypotheses, you have to do a literature review here. Why? To define the methodologies, to develop your methodologies, right? To see whether the methodology that you have in mind, whether it's scientifically valid, right? And if you have doubts, you can follow what others have done to refine your methods, or define new methods, or even to adopt what others have done. You can always follow what others have done. That's why you publish research, so that others would know how you have done the research, And if others are interested in carrying out a similar work with the same methodologies adopted, yes, you can share your methodologies with others. That's why we publish, right? So similarly, you also can look at how others have done research work to identify methodologies, and you select the methods, and then you can conduct the study and you collect data and information. So you have, and once you have information, again, you have to do the literature to see how you are going to interpret the data, right? And once you interpret the data, say, for example, statistical analysis, for example, if you do not know how to do it, you refer to literature, you refer to textbooks, you refer to past papers, you refer to standard methods and so on. And then once you analyze the data, you need to interpret them, and you have to make connections with what others have done for a proper discussion. Again, you will do a literature search and a review here as well. So you know that this is the whole research process. You can't escape not doing any literature search and survey, finding literature, relevant literature, reading them, summarizing them, and reviewing them is a continuous process. You can't finish it at the beginning. You can't ignore that at the initial stages. You can't ignore the finding literature, reading them, analyzing them, synthesizing them in the middle. Even at the end, you need to do the literature review. So literature review, you have to very carefully understand that it's a continuous process where you can't say that I have finished literature review, unless otherwise you say wipe your dust from your table saying that I have concluded my research. Until then, you have to continue with your literature survey, right? So the conducting a literature review has 5 steps. First, you need to search for relevant literature. Then you have to evaluate the sources. Then you have to identify themes, conclusions, and debates among the sources that you have found. You search the literature, and then you have to read, right? I have not said it here, but evaluating, yeah, definitely you have to read. At least your subordinates, your juniors will have to make summaries and give you to at least to do the synthesis part of it. You then evaluate it after reading, and then while reading, you have to identify themes, conclusions, debates, etc., that are recorded, that are reported, that are written in past literature. And then you are ready with sufficient amount of knowledge, sufficient amount of data, information, to write your own structure, right? Don't ever start writing anything, any technical writing without a structure. Please develop a structure for writing. Even when we were say studying in our junior school, I can still remember that our Sinhala teacher always tells us before starting to write an essay to write the structure, right? The structure can be written on a piece of paper. Maybe the structure may be in your way of thinking, right? You don't have to put it in writing, but it's always good to put it in writing, because technical studies, research studies are more complicated than writing a simple essay when you were in the junior school, right? And then once you have the outline refined and finalized, then start writing the literature review, right? These are the steps. Let us go to each of these steps one by one. Step 1, the search for relevant literature, right? You need to search for relevant literature, without which you can't have a proper review done, because you might not have sufficient information, data to analyze and synthesize. Right. The first step, therefore, is to search for relevant literature. For that, you need to have 2 things. You need to have a clearly defined topic. And then once you have a clearly defined topic, you need to define the research problem, without which your literature survey search would be not focused. To have a focus, you have to first very well define your research topic. The topic is not to narrow down what you want to do, but at least you need to have a specific topic to work on. It doesn't. this topic is not the title of your research or title of your paper, right? Topic is a very well-defined area for your research, right? If you are working on, for example, slope stability, if you are working on slope stability, impact of say influence of impact of intensity of rainfall on slope stability, well, that might not be the title of your thesis, or that might not be the title of your paper that you are going to write, but still you have to have a specific topic defined. So if you are working on slope stability, influence of rainfall intensity, yes, you can just define your research topic, the influence of rainfall intensity on slopes, stability of slopes, right? If you are working on water pollution, you can say the impact of heavy metals on the health, on the kidney disease, right? Something like that. Now it doesn't need to be the title of your research, the title of your thesis, the title of your research work, but anyway, you have to have a well-defined topic. And the topic is not sufficient. You need to define the research problem, what you are planning to do. If you are planning to do research on say impact of heavy metals on kidney diseases, then you need to define the problem, right? You can say that there's increasing levels of kidney disease in certain parts of the country, and this and that. So you define the research problem so that you have a specific area to work on, and you can then narrow down the knowledge base into a specific area, right? This choosing a topic is very important right from the beginning, right? Don't confuse the topic with the title. Title is a specific the way that you present your topic to others, right? There are some simple important some important questions that you need to ask. Say, even though it's very, I have put this very simply, one of the most difficult things when considering literature review is to develop the research question, right? Your research question or the hypothesis must be something that interests you, but also motivates you to do more investigation into the area that you have in mind, right? So once you or your supervisor or your superior or your research team, when you decide on a particular topic, you may want to create a very broad outline of the topic, right? First, see whether you are interested enough in the topic, right? That's why you are anyway embarking on research, right? Do you know enough about the general context, right? If you know, if you don't know, if you have lack of knowledge, then you do the literature survey, find relevant literature, read, and then define the topic, right? Once you define the topic, see whether you can refine the topic further down to some doable research, right? So do you know how you will actually do the research? If you do not know how you want to do the research, how you actually should do the research, yeah, read again, find literature, talk to other experienced researchers, and then discuss, and then try to define your topic that has to be a doable research. And you have to ask another question, very important question, whether do you know what resources you need to do the research? What methods that you need to follow? What experimental facilities that you need? What type of analytical equipment that you need to have? What type of statistical software that you need to have? What type of mathematical models that you need to have? What type of commercially available models that you need to have, or whether you need to develop models, right? So when you choose the topic, you need to have a general understanding of the topic to refine it further, and you need to understand how to do it, and you have to have an understanding of the resources that you have to do the research. If you are satisfied with all these, then you can define your topic and you can embark on your research. You can carry on with the work further, right? To do all these, you need to refer to past literature. Right? I'm not telling you how to choose your topic or how to define your topic, but I want to stress on the point that to define your topic, to choose your topic, still you need to do a good literature survey and find relevant literature. Spend a good time on understanding the general context, to refine your topic and to see whether how you actually should do the research and the resources that you need to have to conduct the research further, right? So the step one would be to define the context and background. You have to answer these questions. How does the problem affect the real world, right? This is the justification or the importance of the research. Has it been an issue for a long time, or is it a newly disclosed problem? This is the originality of what you are doing. Together with the justification, you find an originality, and it gives the basis for conducting your research. What research has already been done? Has any solutions been proposed? What are the current debates about the problem? Right. So to write the introduction of your thesis or your paper or your research report, you have to answer these things, right? To answer these things, once you choose the topic, you need to develop the research question, right? To define the research question, you need to answer these 5 questions. To answer these 5 questions, you need to have a very good understanding of past literature. You have to do a good reading. The step 2, specifically again, to define the research problem or the research question, specificity and relevance is also very important. What specific characteristics, theme, or aspects that you should focus on? What aspects will you not be able to tackle? This is very important to make sure that now when I mentioned to you from the previous slide, a doable research and to define the methodologies, you need to match the abilities that you have and the abilities of which your team has developed, and then the resources that you have, including time, funding, as well as equipment and software, for example, whether you can tackle the research problem with the existing resources that you have. Time is a very precious resource that you need to think of, whether the time frames are sufficient enough to do the work, right? What will be the consequences if the problem is not resolved? Now, so you can start the research work by defining the research problem very well, but what is the consequence of consequences if the problem is not resolved, right? If you cannot reach your objectives, if you cannot satisfy your objectives, if you cannot achieve your objectives, what is the consequence of it, right? So you need to have, if you are working on methods which are not very well proven, if you are in doubt, I mean, that's how you carry on with your research. Some of you, yeah, I think the methods might not be very well defined. You might take one step at a time and then go forward. Even though you have a very well-developed plan, there can be gray areas for conducting your research. So always try to have a backup plan or a contingency plan when you embark on research. Right. For that also, you need to have a very good understanding of the background of your studies, the methods that you want to apply, and you need to see how others have overcome such obstacles or difficulties when carrying out similar research. For all those, please refer to previous literature and then find out how they have carried out in the past and get clues from their experiences. For that, you need to read a lot from past literature. Then your literature review, therefore, should be guided by a central research question. You have to develop your research question very well. You have to have a thorough understanding of what you are planning to do. Once you have defined the topic and the area of your research, and when you are clear about the research area that you are going to embark on, not area, but the specific topic that you are going to embark on, once you develop, once you define your research problem, then you can define your aims and objectives of your research, and then you can carry on with your literature survey, right? You have to remember, it's not, the literature survey is not just to look for collection of loosely related studies in the field. But it should present you with the background and research developments that have taken in the past to give you a very clear understanding to refine what you are planning to do, your methods. First, to give you a very clear picture of the, to give you the ability to define the research need, to give proper justification for your study by way of defining a research gap and a research question. And then you develop, you define or formulate your research objectives, and then you define your research methods and embark on your research, right? So that at that point, you might need to interpret and analyze your research question in a synthesized way, in a focused way, and try to find keywords to define your topic, right? So you have to make sure that your research question is not too broad or too narrow. If it is too broad, you will end up with thousands and thousands of past literature, which you will not be able to go through anyway, right? So you need to narrow down your topic to a manageable, comprehensible, coherent, and a logical framework, right? So, which involves clearly defined research problems and associated questions. Now, take an example. For example, take this example: impacts of water quality on human health. Right. So, for some, this might be a very well-defined topic for research. But for an experienced researcher, while looking at this, you have two things. What do you mean by impacts? Right. There can be positive impacts, there can be negative impacts, there can be long-term impacts, there can be short-term impacts, there can be chronic impacts, there can be mild impacts. I mean, this has to be very well defined. This is not very comprehensible. It's not very logical. Now, when it becomes water quality, now when water, drinking water, or it is fresh water that we are talking of, whether it's groundwater, surface water, whatever it is. When you combine these two words, water quality, what I refer to water quality of say ambient water quality or drinking water quality, whatever it is. So you have to define this further. Human health. I mean, human health from head to your toe. You have different parts of your body, right? There are hundreds and thousands of ailments that this human health can represent. Are you referring to neurological ailments or say your hepatic ailments or whatever that affects your kidneys, whether affects say child growth, neonatal or postnatal health of babies, or say making you disabled, or say whether it whether it affects your brain development, whatever it is, you have to define these very well, right? So this is not a very well defined. Now, this can be a very broad topic, but little by little, you have to make it. This is very broad. You have to make it a bit narrower, until you are satisfied with a very specific area, right? You can say chronic impacts of arsenic in drinking water on kidney health of people or something like that, right? So you very specifically define impacts, very difficult, specifically define the water quality parameter and the human health impact that you are planning to discuss, right? So you can start with a very broad topic, but little by little you have to narrow that down to a manageable, comprehensible, coherent, and a logical framework, right? Once you have narrowed it down, now this narrowing down can take months and months. You can't do it on a single day, for example. You have to read and then refine it, refine it, right? For experienced researchers, it might take a couple of days, but for say certain others, it might take. Don't ever think that you have to do it within a certain time frame, unless otherwise you are registered for a degree, right? If you are registered for a degree, then the time frame that you have is limited. Then you are pressurized to do things quickly. But anyway, please try to narrow the topic down to a manageable whole, so that then you can begin writing down your keywords. Right? These keywords are very important to which comes out from your way of thinking. You have to narrow down the area to a global research project, and then you have certain keywords in mind that where you can use these keywords for your subsequent literature search, right? So I'm not going to read the first part, but the second part is important here. Say how do you define keywords? First, brainstorm concepts and keywords, right? You have to ask yourself to discuss with your say seniors, with your co-workers. Then try to define the keywords. Ask yourself if these concepts are too broad or too narrow. Write down a list of related terms or synonyms and develop a concept map. Right? How do you develop a concept map? All the keywords, so main keywords or the specific objectives at the center, and these this can be at the center, and then try to develop keywords connected with that. So some keywords might be connected to other key concepts as well, right? So you can have kind of a concept map, something like that, right? This is a more descriptive way of doing it. You have your central research question. You have objective 1, objective 2, objective 3, objective 4. Out of these 4 objectives, you can have keywords developed one after the other, right? So if you want to do a literature review on this, you make use of these keywords and do the literature review to satisfy the need to achieve this objective, right? If you want to achieve this objective, you go by some other keywords and then find literature, read them, study them, and then make summaries and synthesis and review, and try to satisfy the needs of this the objective. Now, if your main focus is climate change, for example, you will have different objectives. Say this researcher might be looking at evidence of climate research. That is one objective, right? How to manage climate change, the second objective. So for example, go on the clockwise. Evidence for climate change, and then causes for climate change, and then how to mitigate climate change, how to manage climate change. There are 3 objectives for the research on climate change, right? So this is a very broad topic anyway. For evidence, then warming oceans, melting glaciers, rising sea levels. These are some of the keywords that this author has identified, this researcher has identified. Causes for climate change, natural processes and human activities. Human activities, population increases, burning fossil fuels, right? Again, how to mitigate them. You have so many keywords defined. This is, in fact, a summary of what you are planning to do. But anyway, this will this work plan will give you a concept map, and this concept map will give you this itself will give you lots of keywords for you to go through, right? This is a very complicated keyword search given by a researcher who is carrying out research on landslide susceptibility, right? The keyword, the main theme is the landslide susceptibility and hazard zonation approaches, right? Then how many approaches, what are the main approaches? Quantitative approaches, semi-quantitative and qualitative. So qualitative, and then what are the quantitative approaches? There are 2. Semi-quantitative, there are so many others. Qualitative, there are so many others. So it's as a concept map, this researcher is trying to develop the keywords. Once you have the keywords, you can embark on your search. But always make use of pertinent keywords put together as phrases. Don't ever think that when you say keyword, it's just a single word, right? Always it's good to have 2 or 3 words put together for your literature review. So this is a typical demand search demand curve, where when you use a single word for searching, say for example, insurance, health insurance and health insurance for professional athletes. So if your theme is to find out written on health insurance for professional athletes, if you start with insurance, you will end up with say thousands papers in a literature review. So if it's down to 2 keywords, insurance, health insurance, insurance can be any type of insurance, right? Marine insurance, life insurance, health insurance, and so on. So when you narrow that down into a key phrase, 2 or 3 keywords, you will narrow that down to further manageable amounts. If you go further, combining these keywords to narrow that down to further, you will end up with some manageable numbers for your literature review. Oh, there's the sequence of slides has a mistake here, right? Whenever you have say whenever you want to search efficiently, you can use Boolean operators and or not, and then once you have find the literature, start reading the abstract, right? And if you find that the abstract is interesting enough, then find the full paper and go through the full paper. Once you read, say if you find that this abstract is very relevant to your research, find the full paper, go through it very carefully, and then then again go to the search engine and try to find papers. When you find one very good paper, go through the bibliography, go through the list of references provided in that particular paper. Because if that paper is very relevant to your research, definitely there will be more relevant papers listed in the list of references of that particular paper, right? And then when you go through many such papers, you will see that there are recurring citations. The same author is cited again and again, right? The same study is being referred over and over again. Those are referred to as pivotal article publications or key publications of that particular title. Don't ever miss those articles. You have to read them because they are the most prominent articles in the topic. Right? If you miss them, definitely your evaluator will be asking you, why have you not referred to the paper written by De Silva and Pereira in 2011, right? Something like that. If you identify papers which are recurring, please make sure that you refer to that. And if it is not relevant to you, yes, you can forget about it. But don't miss any key or pivotal articles are published in your particular area of research, right? And then another example, there's something wrong with the organization of slides. I will make sure that I will put them in order before I share that with you. Now, this is the number of papers published, search, year-wise from 1991 to 2019. This is the keywords that have been used is temperature, landslide, slope stability, right? Temperature, shear strength, and clay. Now, these are the Boolean operators that have been used. Temperature and landslide. So they are both combined. Or slope stability. Now, when you have or temperature and landslide or slope stability, one of these, right? So either this or this, right? So this is the number of articles that have been found. Now, when you have temperature and shear strength and clay, this is the number of slides that the author has found, right? Now, there are where to search. Now, there are a wide variety of research databases that are available for search. But for me personally, I would like to pay your attention to 3: Science Direct, Scopus, and JSTOR, right? There are some databases which are very specialized. The abstracts or indexing databases, you can always refer to them. And always try to search databases which are specialized in your field of study, because then it is already narrowed down to a specific area of study. Then you can go through such databases carefully, right? If you are planning to do any literature review using abstracting services, yes, abstracting services are very specific to different areas of study. If you are doing geotechnical engineering, there are abstracting services specifically for such areas. If you are working on environmental engineering, yes. If you are working on ecological conservation, if you are working on agricultural related fields, yes. If you are working on medical related fields, yes, there are specialized abstracting services and indexes. You can refer to them. But for general speaking, the Science Direct is the foremost and the most popular search engine that we have that we can make use of to do any literature search, right? So to give you a feeling of what this is all about. So this is, I typed Science Direct in Google. This is Science Direct. Just click on that. And you have keywords to be typed in here. So you type the keyword slope stability and make a search here. Sorry, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. So it asks for an institution. I'm sorry, I have not logged in, but you can always just let's start from the beginning. I'm sorry, it asks for the institution to log in, which will take time. I will just skip that. Right? If you go to Science Direct, which I don't have it here now. If you go to Science Direct, it will give you some way of searching these. I'll try to use my second computer. I hope you can see this. Can you see this, the screen, the Science Direct?
Yes, sir.
All right, okay. So I typed a slope stability as the keyword search. You can see that there are 562,575 papers. Right? This is too many. You can't go through all these. Because then slope stability, you have to understand that this keyword should be narrowed down. So I will say I will put another word here, slope stability and rainfall intensity. So if I am studying the effect of rainfall intensity on slope stability, yes, I have combined both and I'm doing the search again. Now this 575,000 has now been narrowed down to 15,000, right? If you think that this is again big enough for you to say large enough for you to go through, you can use another Boolean here and you say you can say road traffic. But you have just found one article, right? Rainfall and how it affects road traffic, for example, right? So I'm sorry, there's a spelling mistake here. But this 15,000 now has been narrowed down to 1,017. Now 1,017 is okay, but if you want to narrow that down to something else, you can say not say. You can say cut slopes or infiltration. Right now, this slope stability and rainfall intensity and road traffic, but not infiltration. Right. So you have 623. So you can use these Boolean operators to define these literature survey. So once you have this literature survey, depending on the institutional subscription, these are paid services, but Science Direct has some free downloads as well. You can see now here, this article is free to download, but these articles are not free to download, but you can go through the abstract. All the abstracts are 100% they are available, right? That particular road title, Assessment of the Vulnerability of Road Networks to Urban Waterlogging Based on Coupled Hydrodynamic Model, right? Highlights are given, the abstract is given here. And if the abstract is good enough, if the abstract is interesting for you, then you go through the full paper, try to find the full paper, and then go through the citations of that given in that paper, and then find more papers related to that. Right? That is how you get going with your literature survey. Right. So when you have, say, for example, if you want this paper to be downloaded, you can click on that, and then you can get hold of that paper. Right. If you are interested in this paper, if you are interested in the title, go through the abstract, and then you can, if the abstract is interesting, then you can go through the paper, and these are the references listed in that particular paper. Now, if the abstract is interesting, if the paper is interesting, definitely you will find more relevant matches, more suitable matches for you from this particular list of references, rather than going back to Science Direct and going through the search again, right? So once you have a couple of very relevant, very pertinent, very interesting articles related to your topic, yes, you can go ahead with those papers and the list of references given in those papers for further research, right? So you can do the literature search in such a way that it is focused towards finding the most relevant literature. JSTOR is another paid search that you have. Scopus is again paid, but you can read the abstract from any of these without any restriction. Google Scholar is not a database, but you can again do some search and find relevant literature from the Google Scholar. It gives connections, interconnections, and to other sources, especially the journals themselves, right? So if I go to Google Scholar, this is Google Scholar, right? So if you just I'll type my name. Right now, you can go by author search, and if you are interested in some of the papers, say for example this paper. Now this Google Scholar, the list directly has a link to the journal and the journal page itself, right? So this is a very convenient way of finding papers. Most of these papers are not free to download, but you can read the abstract, right? Once you read the abstract, if you are interested in the abstract, you can find the full paper. But together with the abstract, we have the list of references which are included in that paper, right? If the abstract is interesting enough, you will have further papers that you should be interested in, right? So this is how you have to propagate with to advance to go ahead with your literature review, right? So I am encouraging you to use Science Direct as well as JSTOR Scopus, and Google Scholar is a very easy way of finding literature because it gives these hyperlinks and linkages to other sources as well. Right? So whenever you go through literature, whenever you want to find literature from any other sources, please make sure that you find literature, you go through the literature published only in reliable sources, right? Don't ever trap into the gray areas that you have in the literature, right? Now there are whole lot of journals which are referred to as predatory journals. These are all bogus journals which are published for several purposes. One is to cheat and earn money from researchers, because when the researchers are say when they need to publish their research papers, they are ready to pay large sums of money. And if they are desperate to publish papers, for example, if they are short of time, if they are running against time, for example, if a student has to graduate, then they are trying to find journals or conferences where they can publish the papers fast. In that case, they might they are ready to pay large amounts of money as well. And the trap that these bogus journals, these predatory journals do is to attract these authors who are say pressurized with time or any deadlines to lure them, to bait them and cheat them by publishing the papers that they submit without any review, right? So these predatory journals are usually, they are not reviewed, but they charge money. Once you submit it, they will publish it say within a couple of days, within a couple of weeks. When you publish, don't ever think that you earn any credit by publishing papers in predatory journals. That is some subject to some other discussion which we will take up during the course of this this program, not today's lecture. But my message for you is to make sure that whatever the sources that you refer to, whatever the papers that you find from the online sources, should not be predatory journals or the vanity press. Vanity press, again, who publish journals and especially books which are not reviewed, you submit the manuscript and they will publish it right away without any review, right? So to give you statistics about the gravity of this problem, there are about 30,000 or more journals which are published throughout the world, and estimatedly about 10,000 out of the 30,000 are labeled as predatory, right? If you refer to any publications which are published in predatory journals, then the authenticity of your review is lost, right? So don't devalue what you are doing. Always make sure that you refer to reliable and good journals which are available for you to search, right? So if you need a list of predatory journals, these are some of the lists that are published. Especially the Bears list is the best for publishers, bogus publishers or the predatory publishers, predatory journals, and predatory vanity press. Vanity press, this is for book publishing, right? So this bias list gives all the three for publishers, those who are not authentic publishers, those predatory journals, and the vanity press. Also, you have to, if nowadays there are lots of open access journals available. If you want to know whether the open access journal is reliable or it's something that has respect from the scientific communities, you have to visit openaccessjournals.com. It gives the list of open access journals which are registered with the OA, Open Access Journal web page. Right. So you please refer to these web pages if you need more information on predatory journals. And also there's a report published by Interacademics, which is IAP. I have given you the link to the report. Please, if you have time, please try to visit the site and get a copy and read through. And also a good web that you need if you want to assess the authenticity of a particular journal, even before publishing, even before submitting a journal article to a journal. Please go through this thinkchecksubmit.com, this particular web page, thinkchecksubmit.org, right? So this will help researchers to identify trusted journals and publishers for their research for two purposes. If you want to do a literature review, if you find articles from a particular journal, if you are not sure whether the journal is trusted, whether it's an acceptable journal, go to visit the site, and it will give you a guidance to check whether they are authentic or not. Second, when you are ready to publish your paper, please visit this ThinkCheck Submit web page to see whether the source that you are in mind is authentic, a trusted source. Right? If you publish in predatory journals, you will taint your list of publications. Now, if you list down your publications, and if any of your publications, at least one is in predatory journals, then your list of publications is referred to as a contaminated list. Right. So these predatory journals are pollutants. They are something very toxic to the mainstream of publications. Don't ever think of publishing them, your research in predatory journals. Don't ever think of referring to anything that are published in predatory journals. And this is very important to understand. Think, check, submit. And also the authenticity of journals also can be checked by visiting this COPE website. This is publicationethics.org, Committee on Publication Ethics. I've given you the links for that also. When you have time, please visit this. Right. So that is a very brief description on how to find the sources, how to look at, define the keywords, and how to find relevant literature for your search. The second step of doing the literature review is to evaluate and select sources, right? You have to ask questions about the sources. One thing is whether they are reliable, whether the source is authentic. That is the first thing that you have to do, that definitely you need to do as the first step. The second, what was the research question? Now, when you have papers, when you have the abstracts that are generated in your search page, then go through the abstract, and then subsequently the paper, if it is interesting, find out what the research question of that particular paper is. What are they reviewing? What are they trying to say? What are they trying to discover? What are they trying to study? Right? Then the second, how does it fit into your research? And what are the key insights that you can take from those studies to your study? What were the research methodologies? What is the analysis? How have they analyzed the literature? How they have picked the samples and variables? How have they described the results? What are their results and observations? What are their conclusions, right? And whether the research seems to be complete. And if it is not complete, what else can be done to advance the same topic further? And you can find the research need for your work from such gaps, right? And if there are any critiques done, what are the implications of these critiques? These critiques are very important in literature review, because these critiques will give you ample say information to define your research topic and then to formulate your research questions, right? And then once you say evaluate the sources, the step 3 would be to identify themes, conclusions, debates, and gaps, right? For that, you have to look, once you have the paper with you, try to find, now once you have the papers read, always try to identify themes, and then try to find the gaps and then the themes, right? So you have to look at this literature and understand the trends of the topic over time, the key themes, debates, and disagreements, and always note what are the pivotal publications in that particular research area. And then this is very important for you. Try to find research gaps in what they have done, right? So when you have the papers in hand, when you are ready to do the reading, while reading, you have to focus your attention to some of these, right? Some questions will help you to analyze the research. You have to do the reading, right? And then to summarize what you have read, and then look at the connections and try to interpret them. And that's how you do an integrated analysis, as we discussed before. What was the research question of the study? Identify that first. What was the research funded by a source that can influence findings? This is very important. Some funded sources might influence the methods and the results. What were the research methodologies? This is very important. You have to understand what methodologies have others used to do their studies. Does the research seem to be complete? Could it have been conducted more soundly? What further questions does it raise? How has the study been linked to others? Right? These are the things that you need to find out from while reading. You have to analyze the papers. So you have to get those information from these papers, right? Again, review now. When you have studied, when you have gone through a couple of papers, again, review the abstracts carefully and keep now you have to review the abstracts carefully. Once you have grasped, once you have done the introductory searches, then once you are familiar with the topic, review the abstracts very carefully. Keep careful notes so that you can you may track your thoughts during the research process. Because when you are, say, for example, you are doing a PhD research, you will be spending about 3 to 4 years time to do the research. So when you read the papers this year, you might forget what you have read after 2-3 months, right? Forget about 2-3 years after, right? When it comes to the thesis writing, 3 years after you read the paper, unless otherwise you take careful notes on what you read, you will have to keep on reading the same paper over and over again after after certain months, once you lose track of what you have read. So it's very important that you keep records, you keep careful notes on what you read, to keep track on what you are reading, right? So once you have read a couple of papers, start summarizing them and start taking notes on them, right? So how do you take notes on these? Now, don't try to make complexity from in simplicity. Rather, look for simplicity in apparent complexity. When you take a paper, don't the paper, the thoughts put in the paper may be complicated, right? The theory, the methodology might be very complicated, but don't when you extract information from such papers, when you take your notes, don't make that again complicated, right? Try to say extract data and try to make notes simple for you to go through later and later again and again, because your objective would be to review these the information. For the review, you need to have these information in a simple way, not complex and complex thoughts put over and over again, right? Now, again and again, you have to review the abstracts carefully. Don't think that it's a waste of time to go through an abstract over and over again. If the writings are not clear, go through the abstract again. There's no harm, right? So the aim is to take a lot of information to take down after. I mean, this taking effective notes is very important. As you read, you should also begin the writing process. It's not after reading. While reading, not the first time of reading, but the second time, third time when you read, take notes that you can later incorporate into the text of your literature review, your writing. You don't have to spend more time on finding the literature again and again, right? So it's important for you to keep track of your sources, your citations. After when you go back in time, after some time, then these short notes will give you enough information of what you have read, right? And also this compilation of these short notes will ultimately be very helpful for you to compile your literature review or literature survey or whatever that you call it, right? So you have to paraphrase and summarize key points from what you read, right? You have to keep notes of source information, because when you keep notes, when you write down short notes from a paper, always try to make sure that you write down the source that you take that information from, right? If you take information from a paper published in 1991 by De Silva and Pereira in a particular journal, just write down the full reference of that journal, the paper, right after the information, right? So it is very easy if you have a syntax matrix developed, which I can give you an example of a simple way of keeping records of the literature review. So if you can have a very simple Excel sheet, something like this, to take down your notes, right? So what is this all about? Now I'll make this a bit bigger. So this is a template for you to use to summarize what you see, what you read from past literature. Citation is the full citation of the paper. Now go through the paper and try to identify the purpose, rationale, and the research question that the paper tries to identify, right? Then provide a brief summary in fine form, the theory and the framework that they have used to develop the research, to identify the research need, and then to develop the background for the study, and any methods that they have, any theories that they have used to develop the research methods. Right. So give a summary of the research methods that this particular paper is using, and the summary of main findings. And if they have outlined any study limitations or gaps, you can note them down here. Right? So you have a complete summary of the purpose of that particular research, the theory part of it, the research methods, samples and variables that they are using, and their main findings and main results, and if there are any limitations that they have identified in the discussion part. Then read another paper, right? Identify the purpose of the research question, the need for doing the study, identify the objectives of the study, summary of the theory, research methods, main findings and results, and then the limitations. So when you have about 5 to 10 papers here, start to look at the second part of it. Second part of the sheet is to make connections, make notes on how this research is linked to your study, right? Now you have, when you have about 10 papers, try to make a discussion of your own. Now you have read 10, you have major findings and contributions, and you have major limitations for these studies. Then you can summarize, right? Make a note on how this research is linked to other studies. Now you can make linkages here, and then you can make linkages to your study, right? So then the implications of this your analysis, right? And you can further note down anything here, right? So this is very important. This is what is called the literature review. This is the literature summary. After literature search, you read the papers and you make the summaries, right? So once you have, say, about 10, 15 papers read, when you make your own judgments about the things that you found from the past literature, the linkages, the connections, and how, if you can put your thoughts into the context of your review here. So this is very important. This is what is the literature review is all about. Without which it is just a summary, right? Please make use of these templates for you to summarize what you have read, and try to synthesize, try to make connections of what you read after reading a certain set of papers, right? So when you keep on developing this for a couple of months, for a year or two, you will have a good database for yourself, the summary of what you have read, and the summary of what your analysis would are on these, right? Your synthesis, your interpretations, your take home notes on these journals, right? Because after a couple of months, not to mention about years, you will forget about what you have read. But if you have a summary of what you have read in this synthesized form, in this summary form, then you are through. You don't have to go again and again looking for the same papers and reading them over and over again, right? So I will share this template also with you. Please have a look at it and make use of it for anything that you think would be useful for you. Then the next step would be to outline the structure. Now, when you have the summary, the Excel sheet that I showed you, when you have the summary of all the papers that you have read, maybe 10 papers, 20 papers, 30 papers, and when you synthesize, when you have analyzed, and when you have your own way of interpreting the results, then you are ready to do your structure of your literature review, right? The structures can have many forms. They can be organized based on time, based on theme, based on methodology, or even based on theoretical approaches, right? So we might not have much time here. I have given some examples here. I will just go through one or two. This is an example of a paper where the literature survey has been done in a chronological order based on time. Right, this is the next generation of refrigerants, historical review, considerations, and outlook. Right, it gives you a long description of the refrigeration progression, say from 1830 to 1930, 1930 onwards, 1990, 1990 to 2010 and onwards, right? So the first generation is defined as the 1930 onwards, and the second generation, safety and durability, the third generation. So it gives a long description of these development of refrigerants based on chronological order, right? Chronological order is based on a time factor, right? The next would be a thematic order, right? So you can't you can have these the papers outlined based on the thematic order. Excuse me. this paper is on heavy metal pollution in the environment and the toxicological effects on humans. Now, this has been broken down into different themes: types of heavy metals, sources of heavy metals, properties of heavy metals, and so on. Right. So this is based on different themes to describe the theory part of it: entry, effects, and transport for soil pollution, water pollution, air pollution, and so on. Right, so this is an example of a paper which has been organized based on thematic, right? And then there are two others which I'm not going to details. You can have a look at them, which are not very relevant. Now, these are the common structures which I was referring to: chronological order, thematic order, methodological order, and theoretical order. I have given you hyperlinks. If you need more information, please click on these and see examples of such common structures, which are not very pertinent to today's discussion. So I just skip, but if you need any more information, please have a look at the hyperlinks. And then writing the literature review is the final step of what you are going to do. For the format of the literature review, again, you need to have an introduction, body, and conclusions. Now, the literature review can be, for a journal paper, it can be just half a page, right? It can be 1 page, it can be 2 pages, but still, in your mind, you have to have an organization, a format like this: introduction, establishing the purpose of the literature. Why are you going to do this? Body of the literature and the conclusions, what you have done in the conclusion. But you have if you have a literature review is the main theme of your paper, then you will have the whole introduction will be establishing the purpose. The next, you will do a systematic review or a meta-analysis of literature review. The whole body will be on that, and then you come to conclusions. Whenever you prepare your research, say thesis for your PhD or an MPhil or an undergraduate thesis or your MSc thesis, again, you will have a separate section on literature review. For that, you will have to have an introduction, body, and the conclusion. You don't have to have a subtitle as introduction. You don't have to have a subtitle as conclusions, but this is the organization that you will have in mind, right? So like the academic text, this literature review, whether it's an, as I mentioned to you, even though it is an introduction part of your journal paper, it should have to have a format, right? So the style of writing for standalone literature review is different to when you write a research paper, right? The standalone literature review, the example that I showed you, if you're doing if you're working on a review paper, a systematic review or a critical review or a critical critical review and a meta-analysis, you have a different way of writing the papers, which I'm not going into details because it's a specific area to start with. But for dissertation and thesis and research papers, today I will discuss more on writing research papers. You have to whenever you write the research paper, your introduction part of the literature review should reiterate the central problem, right? So the literature review should be written in a way that the authors of the paper should be able to define the topic that they are trying to discuss, the aim of the paper, the research need, and how they define the purpose of conducting the study, right? So that is to briefly summarize the context of your research, right? So for then to the purpose of any of these, whether it's a standalone literature review or a dissertation or a research paper, the main idea of having an introduction is to reiterate the central problem of the research question and to give a brief summary, to reiterate the central problem and to give a brief summary of the context. The body, the second part would summarize and analyze and interpret and critically evaluate and synthesize different sources with very well-structured paragraphs by citing the sources, right? And then the structure. Usually the structure should analyze the current situation, and then it should give the historical development of the study, and then it should give some references to methods and standards, and it has to give some information on further research as well, questions for further research as well. The current situation, you usually current situation and history, these are parts of the introductory part of your research paper or your thesis, the current situation and the history. Methods and standards, yes, this can be a part of your introduction as well as your development of methods. In your thesis, you can have this current situation, history, methods, all these discussed in the chapter called the literature review, right? And these questions for further research, this typically comes in the discussion part and your recommendations for further research. Right? Then going into the composing of your literature review, you need to use evidence from past literature, right? So that is what we often referring to as citations that you need to make for previous literature, which I will give you some examples. Then you summarize and synthesize whatever the information that you need to include, but you need to keep to your own voice of whatever that you need to read, right? You have to use caution when paraphrasing. Please avoid plagiarism. Don't ever cut and paste and copy from what others have written. You have to use your own voice and then paraphrase the ideas, right? So this the Excel sheet, the template that I gave you, if you try to interpret what you read from literature from time to time, if you make your own notes using your own voice, then such parts of such writing can be made use of to write your literature review, right? So you have to don't ever try to cut and paste unless otherwise they are absolutely needed. If you are trying to state a theorem, for example, you can't change the words of a theorem. You have to state the same theorem. This is not cut and paste. It's not plagiarism. If you want to state apart from regulations, apart from a standard, then you have to use the same wording because you can't change them. In that case, they are not cutting and pasting. They are not plagiarized sentences. But whenever you take parts of writing from others that can amount to plagiarism, please make sure that you don't do it. Right. So composing your literature review, you have to always go away from descriptive to interpretive to critiques. Right. That is the sequence that you have to say. Right? There are three types of the writing styles. One is descriptive writing. Descriptive writing is just a reporting element. It is just you are recording the summaries of what others have done. What has happened in the past, what research has been done, how they have done. You just keep on describing the things, what the authors have discussed, what they have did and what they have found, and an account of their topics, right? So this is just a description of what they are doing, right? So if I give you an example of for that, now this is the refrigeration, the same paper that I showed you. Now, this is just a description, right? It gives you refrigeration goes back to ancient times, blah, 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 and what has happened during certain periods. This is just a description, a summary of what has happened in the past, what has been recorded, what others have done, their methodologies, and so on, right? So whenever you have just a description, it is a summary of what others have done. But in certain cases, in your thesis, in your journal article, you will have some writing which is based on this descriptive reporting element based. More interesting would be, more say relevant to a literature review would be going away from interpretive to critical elements. You ask questions and answers certain other questions which others have asked. You analyze and you explain and you interpret the information, right? And then you synthesize information to develop the point of view. Now, this is the most important part. Now, this is not a literature review. The descriptive reporting part is just a literature summary. For higher level of research, for even undergraduate work, even postgraduate work, even if you are doing research for certain other purposes, you have to move away from descriptive to interpretive. Because this interpretive part, the critical element, when you ask questions, when you answer unanswered questions, when you analyze, explains, and interprets information, when you try to synthesize information based on other findings, yeah, this is what we refer to as the literature review. It's not just a summary, right? And it's going beyond that, going beyond interpretive to critical elements. If you can, even if you can critique, if you can find some gaps in the previous research, I don't refer to them as mistakes, because you don't call them mistakes, but they are say further work to be done. If you can give a critical evaluation of what others have done, right? And if you can point out certain gaps, certain miscalculations, certain misinterpretations, that is the best to include in a literature review. Because when you are responding with critiques, it gives a lot of contribution to the advancement of that particular area of study. It gives ideas for others to develop their research problems and their research objectives. It will give you also a few other avenues to carry on with your research, advancement of your research, right? So this is a way that you have to develop. So you start with descriptive reporting, the Excel sheet that I gave you. When you read 10 papers, for example, you just summarize what has happened, what others have discussed, what they have found, what they have discussed, what the account that that you can take from that particular topic. So that is the descriptive part of it. And then later on, the right-hand side of the Excel sheet that I gave you, you try to interpret it, interpret what you have described. And then, if possible, try to respond with critique, right? So if you have a descriptive reporting formatting, yes, you have started the literature review. This is the starting point. Then go beyond the descriptive reporting, try to interpret the critical and find critical elements. This is better. The best would be to respond with critiques, right? So this is the hierarchy. You start with this. Later on, with time, you start to interpret what you have, the description that you have taken down. And later on, once you carry on with your research, once you have your observations with you, you need to respond with critique if you have to have a meaningful discussion in your thesis, right? So this is the descriptive example that I gave you. Now moving another example, moving from descriptive to interpretive. Now, if you go through this complicated write-up here, these authors validated results against wind tunnel test for a cube-shaped obstacle and found their results were in agreement. Now this is the first part of the sentence is descriptive, and then found their results were in agreement with wind speed upstream and around the obstacle. Now you are trying to interpret it, right? Now this is the interpretation. Now you know that they are in agreement with something, right? But then you say no statistical comparison of results is provided, but a graphical representation is included. You just don't say that these authors have done, they have validated these CFD results, but you are trying to interpret them, right? You say that they are in agreement, but no statistical comparison has been done. Then you are trying to interpret their results. Downstream results showed a degree of error which the authors attributed to the choice of turbulence model, right? So you take that observation and you interpret it your own way. A CFD model was then generated for simulated streets of houses, which clearly defined a set of parameters. Results showed there was a slight increase in the wind speed. These results were based on blah, blah, blah. So you take their results and you try to interpret their results in your own voice, right? You are not repeating what they have done. You are trying to use evidence from this particular paper, and then you try to summarize and synthesize them, and you keep your own voice, and you use cohesion when paraphrasing, and you are trying to say do the interpretive way, right? So these are the slides that I have all about, right? So you have use evidence to interpret, you summarize and synthesize their findings, you are keeping to your own voice, you are using cohesion when paraphrasing without falling into the trap of plagiarism. This is what you read and summarize, and this is what you report in your literature review, right? So this is a good example of that, right? Now, going beyond that, now the same authors, they respond with critiques in a different part of the paper. This particular author conducted internal experiments to measure wind flows. Measurements were taken using Doppler. This is interpretation, right? This is the observation, the description, and the interpretation. Sampling frequency of instantaneous measurements were not specified. No, this is a critique. He has found some say gap in what they have not done. Results were limited to the investigation of one upstream speed. Now they have now this author is highlighting a limitation of this previous study, right? Wind speeds were mildly retarded, statistical significance not provided. Again, this is a critique, right? Critical on that, right? Because without statistical significance, the results might not be justifiable, right? Although Reynolds stress was reduced for higher buildings, results demonstrated significant differences in wind parameters, right? Greater turbulence intensity close to rooftops for pista. So he's again trying to extend that to include his own way of interpreting the results and moving from interpretive way to critiques, right? So this is a good example of doing that. Another example here, the research described above have all used wind tunnel tests to investigate wind speed. This is just a summary. And then these two used wind tunnel tests to investigate wind speed measurements, right? So the authors investigated wind speeds without spoiler. This is interpreting what they have done. And say roughness was not specified. The dimensions of building were not clearly defined. This is critique. Results indicated within the duct greater than blah, 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 right? And the authors calculated mean velocities. Now, this is again interpreting their results, and no analysis is made of multiple ducts. Although the author's hypothesis that installation of several ducts could result in an overall, this is analysis at the same time critiques, right? So this is a way to interpret without just rather than saying that these authors found this and that. You interpret their results and then try to give a critique. Right. Another example. So this is the interpretation of their results. Immediately above the roof level, the results showed a strong mean shear flow. There was a slight increase in the root mean square velocity. The methodology of the measurements and time periods of average were unclear. This is so even though he tried to interpret, he can't further interpret it because these are unclear. Right. Transient effects were not considered by the authors. And the paper neglects to specify the controlled approaches, such as these are all critiques. I mean, this is not to find fault with the previous paper, but he must be trying to make a point by critically analyzing these results, right? Trying to find a research gap, for example, right? This is a typical example of a literature review. It's not just a literature summary that we are talking of. We have to think of literature reviews. This is a review without not going beyond descriptions, not having interpretations and critiques. There cannot be any. You can't call them literature review, right? For literature review, you can use these phrases abundantly, very often, right? This shows that. This is the descriptive, right? When you summarize the findings of others, use this shows that, and you highlight the points. This is important and significant because you just say that you are moving away from descriptive to interpretive, right? This is worth noting because now this word because is always trying to interpret what others have done. This calls attention to. This can be illustrated by what this all means. This is you are trying to go from descriptive to interpretive. Descriptive is just recording what others have done, but with all these phrases, you are trying to move away from descriptive to interpretive. Blah 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 tells us that. Importantly, this suggests that, which points to, suggests that, which is vital, crucial, which shows, illustrates. Now, all these phrases can be made use of to describe, so interpret what others have reported, right? But on the other hand, when you are writing critiques, these are some of the examples that you can use. A question that needs to be asked, however, is whether a weakness with this argument, however, is that. Now, this is a description of an argument. However, now this word, however, will deviate the focus, which will give you something to argue with. One of the limitations with this explanation is that one limitation, you are trying to find a limitation that is critiquing what others have found, right? The approach fails to take something into account. The study would have been more useful had it blah, 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 right? This is something that you are trying to fill. Now, these are some of the phrases that you can make use of if you are trying a critique. Now, when you have that Excel template, you can have all the summaries, descriptive results, right? And then the right-hand side, try to interpret it, right? Later, once you have about summaries of, say, a sufficient number of papers, then start to write critique. Critique is not the critique that you do in literature, right? This is try to find connections and trying to find further work, try to find research needs, try to find justification for what you are doing. For that, you need to do some critiquing, right? So examples of using literature, we are now trying to close this. I will give you some examples of something that we can look at holistically. Now, what we have what we have studied so far, I will highlight. Now, these are all randomly found papers. I found just before starting the lecture. I just found this paper, and I'm now trying to show you some of the features that we were discussing. Now, this particular paper. Now, this particular paper is all about what is it about? Evaluation of cultural ecosystem services of wetland parks, right? Now, it gives an introduction to the paper, right? And the introduction to the paper with some chronological order, he's giving some examples of the uses of wetlands. And these references are given at the bottom of the paper here, right? And then little by little, the authors develop this study, and they are putting the information into context. And the middle of the study, recently, some studies have evaluated blah blah blah. Now the researchers are trying to focus on a research need, right? Now this is the introduction part that I was referring to you. Not this introduction, but introduction to the introduction, right? Giving some background information for the topic, right? With references to previous literature. And then in the middle, it gives a body of the literature review, trying to focus on finding a need to conduct this study. And this information that you give in the middle of the introduction part would be the part that is important to identify or to formulate your objectives. Right now, here this sentence is important here. Recently, some studies have evaluated blah blah blah. These methods have been used to compare certain things. This is he's doing some interpretation of what others have done. In comparison, again, now there are so many methods that he or she, these authors are discussing about the methods which have been developed recently, and how they have compared. And the authors are also now trying to compare these methods. This is the interpretation of the past literature, the past findings. And later, however, now this is very important word. However, there's a deviation from the discussion. Now the authors are trying to find a need for conducting this study. However, the non-monetary something it has not been done. Overall, the appropriate method should be chosen for a different study based on certain things. Now the authors are trying to deviate from what has already been done to identify a research need, right? And then the research need is now based. Now the basis for based on the research need, they are trying to give a justification for the study and try to formulate their objectives, right? Now, with that particular interpretation of interpretive literature review part, however, there are still gaps. So that is the research question. They have found a research gap in previous studies. The arguments are set in a way that the authors interpret the previously found, previously established knowledge in a descriptive way, and arranging in a descriptive way, and then reviewing it in an interpretive way, right? So the descriptions are at the beginning of the study of the write-up, and then the interpretation of the write-ups in a way that it identifies, it gives a basis for justifying the present study, and to give to help the authors define the objectives, and the justification is finally given here. However, these words are very important. However, is very important word here. However, there are still gaps. Okay, now when the reader goes through the paper, he knows that, okay, there are still gaps. What are these gaps? So the authors try to identify these gaps, and then giving examples. However, on the other hand, on one hand, on the other hand, giving all the interpretations, giving examples, nevertheless is and thus all these are very good keywords to define the research need and the objectives, right? And this is now then they are against this background. All these interpretive way of doing the literature review has given the basis to define the objectives of the paper. And so this is how they have organized the literature review based on past literature. So this is how you have to read these papers. I will attach this also with my analysis for you to go through this again. And when you go further down for methods also, they might have been using other literature. So let us go to another example. So this is again a wetland paper, right? Now here, now this is a very short introduction up to here, just say half a page here and say half a column here. Now, right from the beginning, these authors, I did try to identify a need to conduct the study, primary cause for wetland losses. Therefore, this has to be done. Indeed, what has been done, right? For example, similarly, all these words are very important to make an argument. To right from the beginning of this introduction, the authors are trying to give a justification for what they have been doing and what they are presenting in this paper, right? Referring to the previous paper, previous articles, and all these cross references, citations are clear from you can see from this write-up. And their interpretation of past literature has been arranged so that they identify a research need, right? So wetland loss is worrisome. That is the conclusion. And then finally, this must be planned from an environmental sustainable perspective. That is, the need is very clearly given. And the second part, the concept has recently been broken down, and it is not a new concept. There's a potential tool that they are going to use, even though they are developed in Europe, but they have not been analyzed, applied somewhere else. Application is in its early stages. So they are trying to, this application of urban planning is in early stages. They are trying to advance this urban planning tools to further include other areas of the work. Based on this work, now he's going to define the specific objectives of this based on the previous work. Present study aims at specifically assessing blah blah blah. So these authors are trying to then give an interpretation, so give a brief description of the objectives of the paper. Right? See the arguments how they have developed from from the background, and then interpreting the past literature. Sorry. And then trying to identify the research need based on the past literature again, by interpreting what others have done and trying to find a gap to do the research, and then how they have defined the need to conduct the study and how they present the aim for the study. And this is a very summarized way of presenting a literature review, right? So those are the two examples that I had in mind to share with you now, but I have some more examples. Please bear with me for about 10 more minutes. Now, the literature review, this is a summary that I'm going to tell you. Literature review, therefore, can be used to define the research question, right? You can make use of the literature review to define the research question. What topic have you chosen? Can you write the working title? Are you focusing on anything? Have you specified the location? What aspects are you trying to look at to take the research further? To define the research question, you need to do a literature review, right? So that is what I explained here, right? And then second, from 1, I have jumped to 3. These numbers might be wrong. I'll correct them. Then once you define the research topic, you need to do a literature review to define your aims and objectives, which I have showed you in the previous example. You have to be realistic in terms of what you can do in your project. You provide that you and your supervisor or your colleagues if they provide you with indicators how you intend to do, you have to make use of the literature and define your aims and objectives. Approach the literature and theoretical issues, assess your chosen subjects, develop a sampling framework, develop a strategy and a design to data collection, and to do the rest of the literature. The aims and objectives are important. Once the aims have been established, the next task would be to set the objectives. But aims will give you the general intention of the research. What would you paint as a picture to present your research as a project, to emphasize on the outcome and whether you are going to address the long-term project outcomes. Right now, the objectives will give you basic steps how you are going to achieve the goals. Right. So when you set the goals, you need to have a proper literature review, as I showed you in the previous examples, without which you can't set your objectives without a proper literature review, right? So you have to set your aims first, and then aims based on your aims, you have to define your objectives. These objectives definitely should be supported by the previous literature, right? To give you just some examples. This one I have, I think, yeah, this is from geotech. This is slope stability paper. Now here, this author has gone through the lots of previous literature to define the area of study. Right? He has referring to these limit equilibrium methods of slope stability, and he has tried to find some say gaps in using LEMs and how to define factor of safeties, and then going on to FEM and trying to going further to include SRM, and then again GIM. So he's trying to establish his methodology, his objectives based on the past literature, going one after the other, but at the same time trying to interpret what others have done so that he can develop the aim and objectives of that particular study, right? So these are 4 examples. These are not the same. Now, this particular study, the above studies focus on the effects of, this is a vehicle loads on slope stabilities. So giving an interpretation of lots of studies, and then concluding that the above studies focus on the effect of vehicle loads on slope stabilities. But there are few studies on the effect of vehicle loads. This but, the word but, even though there are only 3 letters, it is a very, very important word that is used here. Now, prior to this paragraph, maybe he has interpreted what others have done, maybe say 2-3 paragraphs. And this paragraph is the concluding paragraph for setting the objective for the study. There are few studies on the effect of vehicle loads on change of slope stability. That's why he is doing the study. And therefore, we used blah blah blah. So, but and therefore here are connected, which are mainly used to define the objective, right? So, to set that objective, you need to do a proper interpretation of previous literature and then find the gap. The second example here, by zooming out spatial and temporal scales, it is still possible to find evidence from blah blah. However, investigation on this matter has been so far limited. So this is the gap that they have identified, right? So this gap identification has to be done by interpreting what others have done in the past, right? So this, however, is very important word here. Investigation on this matter has been far limited as more. And then he's trying to establish the objectives of this particular study by identification of the research gap. Identification of the research gap and establishing the objectives cannot be done without interpreting, without reviewing the literature. Right? Example here on the right hand up there. Various studies have been performed to evaluate blah blah. We are trying to interpret. Stacking assemblies and efficient assembly method, blah blah blah. The second layer, right? Details on the assembly systems we will present in addition. So this is trying to give the basis for the study and what to expect from the study, the objectives, right? In this study, FM was used, and this is the objective of the study is given there, right? Now, another example is given at the top right-hand side. In the middle of this sentence, has been widely recognized and quantitatively understood for decades. There are still no mature methods for estimating the intact rock content of a rock slope. This is the identification of the research need. This cannot be done just as one sentence. You have to do a lot of literature review before to arrive at this summary here. These are all examples. Just go through these examples and see how they have identified the main objectives, how they have, how they're proposing these examples, right? So highlighting the research need has to be done based on the literature review, and for that you have all these words to use, but nevertheless, still, yet, though, therefore, and so on. So you can make use of all these to make sure that you identify the research need, right? So also you can use the literature. This is the final slide I think I have. Yeah, to find the originality also, you can make use of the past literature. So for example, if you go through these two examples, you will find that how they have identified the originality of the research that they are planning to propose, right? So so here in this the middle of the second paragraph here, starting from the principle stating that the new idea of this paper is based on progressively changing the magnitude. So this highlights a new idea. That's the originality is highlighted here, right? Now on the right hand side, again, the PCA, GA, SVM model was employed in the training samples and test samples in idea. Accordingly, the complex relationships were effectively solved, and a novel idea for the prevention and control of highway slope was proposed. Now he is trying to give highlight the novelty of the research, the originality of the research, where you need to do in the introduction part of your paper or your thesis, whereby you give justification for what you are doing. For that, you need an extensive literature search and go through the search, synthesize them, interpret them, critique them, and that is what you refer to as the literature review, Then to establish research methods, what you do, what you need to find out, how we are going to do this. Is there more than one way of finding out what you need to do? What methods other people have used in similar situations? What are the strengths and limitations of the methods that you are using? For all these, you need to do a literature review and then establish your methods. Say, for example, when you want to establish a study area based on the past literature, you find a study area to conduct your study. Again, the right-hand side, there's an example of establishing say determination wetland area along with the mainland. I mean, the methods that has been established based on the past experiences, right? So the methodology, if you are conducting developing a mathematical model, you can refer to the previous papers. If you are developing a theoretical framework for conducting a slope stability analysis, you can refer to previous work of others and then develop the framework. If you are planning to carry out a water quality analysis, you can refer to water quality and testing, standard way of testing, standard way of collecting samples, testing, analysis, and further work. For that, you need a proper literature review, right? And then for critical analysis, right? Critical analysis, we have I have given you examples, which I'm not going to give examples. So if you want to make any correlations and interpretations of your experimental or survey or modeling data, when you want to compare your data with the previous findings, if you want to analyze uncertainties or any errors in the data, if you want to discuss why methods and procedures have to be changed, and if you want to discuss about strategic decisions based on your observations, if you want to critically compare your information with other literature, for all these you need to carry out the literature review, right? So these are critical reviews. Again, two more examples that I've given you. Now here also you can see in blue color, there are lots of references to previous research. And if you go through these, you can see that they are not just descriptions, they are not just summaries, they are all interpretations and critiques. On the right-hand side is also the same, it's a bit theoretical, but it also gives the way of doing these critiques, right? So in conclusion, we have now gone through the summaries and examples. Standalone reviews, it's kind of a long report that you are preparing for theses and research papers. You have to make sure that you summarize what you read, and then you interpret what you read, and then find connections and place your work within the context of what you have interpreted, and then further extend that to critically evaluate the scenarios and what your findings, without which your review is not complete. With your descriptions, with your summaries, the second step would be to interpret them. Then you are through. Then you have 2 stars, right? Summary form, you have only 1 star. When you make interpretations, you have 2 stars. You can end up that there. But if you want 3 stars, then you try to find connections, try to find more gaps, try to find misinterpretations or gaps within what others have done. Try to critically analyze the results, observations of the others, and give a summary of that. That is the best way of doing the critical review, especially to identify the research need, to justify your research, and also to give a lot of emphasis of the importance of what you have found in the results and discussion part. You can make use of the making interpretations, and going beyond that, always do a critical evaluation of your interpretations. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is the final slide that I have. Now, if you want to become a good researcher, I would request, I would bring to your kind notice that you need these to develop your writing skills. To make sure that you write a good literature review, you need to have superior writing skills, without which you will have to depend on others to correct your writing, which is sometimes frustrating, which is sometimes embarrassing, but which is sometimes not very rewarding. Always try to become a good writer develop your scientific writing skills, technical writing skills, to become a good researcher, to become a good engineer, to become a good scientist. You need to have superior writing skills. To develop writing skills, just have a look at these papers. Once you get these, try to get hold of these publications. These are all books. Once you get these books, you will automatically know why I suggested these books for your regular reference. These are so important, right? It's up to you to decide whether these publications are important to you. This is nothing to do with literature review, but to make sure that you become a good writer, right? Without good superior writing skills, your literature review will not become a good piece of writing. Improve your writing. Master your writing, become a master of scientific writing, technical writing, and produce a good literature, right? So that we will be also in a position to review your literature and and contribute to the advancement of science. I wish you all the best, ladies and gentlemen. If you have anything to discuss, I can stay back. You can ask anything from me. I'm very glad to share these slides. I will send this to the IESL so that they can share the slides. I'm not sure whether they are ready to share the presentation video also. I don't have any
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah. Right. And at the last page, I have given some some of these slides were based on information available online. I always invite you to refer to these sources. They are very extensive. They are very comprehensive. There are lots of video clips as well where you can go through, and these are entire sites which have not only literature review, but the entire research process is summarized in these websites. Please have a look at these websites. I can share these links as well. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for IESL and SLAS for giving me the opportunity to be with you today. I'm sorry I had to rush through the last few slides because of the time limitation. I've taken half an hour more than the time allocated, but I should thank you all for being with me throughout. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much for very informative presentation. And if you have any questions, it's any time that we can allow them to talk, but just for the question only. So you can raise hands and we will unmute you, then you can ask question. And also that if there are any questions that you can type into the website for the chat box, but I feel that chat box is really full with a lot of thanking notes. So therefore, I think better to raise your hands, please. Yeah. Mr. Ravi, I think you can unmute. Yes, please ask your question.
Sir, thank you very much for your informative webinar. I want to know, sir, that you have done a manual template to take notes and that go through that one. How about using Mendeley software then doing it manually?
The last part of your question was not very audible.
He's asking about the Mendeley software to put whatever the notes. Actually, tomorrow we are going to conduct the lecture on referencing style there that you can know about it. Yeah,
I think Dr. Kaumal will explain to you about the software that is available, especially this whatever the organizing the software that you have, and also web pages like Mendeley. I think Dr. Kaumal will introduce you onto that. Yeah, yes. I will share the Excel sheet with me. I will have a folder and I will have all the hyperlink documents included in the folder, including the Excel sheet.
Thank you very much. And also that a small note, this lecture will be telecast through the IESL YouTube channel, and the link also given. And so you can join. You can join through the YouTube channel and you can listen to the lecture once again. And also that we can share the Yes,
Plus,
sir.
Vandana, there's a
Yeah.
question from no,
We can't look at the questions because there are many thanking notes. So
yeah,
if
it is
you are,
running. Yeah, I think
it's
Keith
running.
is asking, so if we are doing completely new concept, but which were done very few scholars before, and hard to find direct related literature, then how can we? Yeah, now I think Keith, now in that case, if you are moving on to very new areas, I think that itself will give you because if you say that it's enough, nobody has done this before. That itself will give you, if you can justify that, if you can establish that, it will give itself the idea of that particular idea will give you ample opportunities for justification. In that case, yes, you can interpret for justification. You might review literature and interpret. Sometimes you might not be able to go beyond interpretive to critiques. Right, critique is something that is being done for a mature type of research. You need to have lots of experience to do that, lots of information to do that. But say if you are onto very new ideas, very new concepts, sometimes critique is not that relevant. Probably interpretation is okay, but not beyond that.
Thank you. The next question is from this is writing started.
Rasmia Begum, could you please explain the difference between the introduction and LR of a thesis? Yeah, the introduction. Yeah, that's a very important thing. Question, Rasmia. Now, in the introduction, your objective would be to establish the research need, to define the research question, right? Research need. You have to review the past literature, interpret them, and you have to identify the research need, a research gap. Based on that, you have to formulate a research question. Based on that, the aim and objectives of your study, right? For that, you need to do a literature, right? So your introduction part of your thesis should contain sufficient literature review to establish the research need and then to define the aim and objectives of your study. So that is what you do. And the literature review would be much broader than that, right? The literature review is not just a summary, as I mentioned to you before, but you need to have some keywords to have an outline for the structure of the literature review. And then you go summarizing what others have done and interpreting them, and if possible, critiquing them. Right? So introduction and literature review should be distinctly, there should be two parts. Introduction, yes, you need literature review. It's the most difficult part to do. Doing a proper literature review and interpretation of previous studies to identify the research gap and then provide a justification for what you are doing by formulating a good research question and then setting the objectives for your study.
Thank you. There's several questions.
Yeah, this science directory scopus for some papers, it's asking for payment. Yes, I know. There are some institutions who have subscription for Science Direct and Scopus, but they are very expensive. Even at Murray University, we find it very difficult to pay the subscription for Science Direct, for example. The full subscription will be about 700 million rupees, right? About it's impossible. Sorry, it's about 70 million rupees. Which is impossible to pay. But what you can do is there are free downloads, or else you can contact the author. If you just send an email to the author, they will be very glad to share a copy of the paper. That is what most of the researchers do. Once you get, because the abstract in any database, together with the abstract, there will be a list of authors and their contact details. You can contact one of them and then ask for a copy.
There's another question.
So how do we know that we have covered all relevant literature? Yeah, I think that you have to based on your experience, because I have seen many students when they write the literature review of the thesis, they write everything under the earth related to that particular topic. No, you have to limit your literature review to the research question and the objectives. The keywords are included in these research questions and objectives, nothing other than that, right? So if you have a topic like say effect of methane on emitted from say solid waste dump sites and the effect of global warming, you don't go on describing about global warming and greenhouse say gases and global warming potential of any others. You all relate to the methane generation in dump sites and the methane, the impact of methane, right? Don't forget about all the other causes, all the other say related things. But if I give this to a student, he might have 10 pages on global warming, 10 pages on disasters created by global warming, again 10 pages related to other gases, but only 1 page related to methane. No, you have to limit your literature review to the keywords that you use. Now this Yoga Prabhaharan, what extent research papers to be reviewed? That is a very subjective thing. I mean, it depends on the nature of your research. Sometimes some researchers are very satisfied with about 20 to 30 papers, but some researchers, they might be going through hundreds, say more than 100 papers. As long as you are not able to find pivotal papers covering your topic, you will be say searching here and there. You might be say reading hundreds and hundreds of papers. You need to have a focus, right? Always it's good to talk to experienced researchers when you do the literature review to find out whether you have found the most pertinent, most relevant literature related to that question, right? Once you have now you may have a feeling that you have referred to sufficient number of papers. Don't ever set numbers first before you embark on research. Depends on the nature and your efforts and your interest. Go on doing the literature review, downloading papers, and you will feel that you're okay, you are happy. Then you can stop. Asita Vijayasinghe, for example, if research areas fall detection, when the I'm sorry, this all this is jumping here and there. What you propose is yes, good. Yeah, you can have summaries prepared in an Excel sheet for at least 10 papers with the information, and then you can then you have a basis to compare the papers with. When you have summaries of the papers, then you can eliminate. You might see that some papers are not very relevant, but some are more relevant. In that case, you can delete some of these papers from the Excel altogether, right? So at the end of the exercise, you will have all the most relevant papers so that you can extend that to review for your interpretation part later on. Okay, Esther?
There is a question from Dinisha.
No, there's another paper. Does the submission of a paper needs to be done through the institution? That depends on your obligation towards the institution. But if you are full-time affiliated to an institution, you have to identify yourself, your affiliation in the paper. If say I am working for Moratuwa University, whatever the papers that I submit will have the name of the University of Moratuwa, because I am a full-time employee there. I am not independent of the affiliation to the university when I do the research work. So if you are attached to, say, for example, maybe a GSMB or like PIT or even Rubber Research Institution or say MBRO, if you are doing work related to, if your paper or if your work is related to the work of the institution, then you need to, it's not submitting through the institute, but you have to identify yourself, your affiliation as an employee of the institution. And there's another question. Do we need to make link with literature and what we're going to do in the research? Yes, yes, yeah, definitely. When you have interpretations from and links to the past literature, you have to identify these links as way of citing them, right? Even the introduction part. Yes, the examples that I showed you will clearly give you indications how you have to identify these sources. And then, sir, can you please share the? Yes, definitely, I will share the Excel sheet. Yeah.
To share the whatever the documents, you have to register. Otherwise, that we may not know.
Yeah, I think,
right?
first, Bandhani, why are they sending these email addresses?
I don't know. We didn't ask.
Yeah, because because I can't be sending this to all these email addresses.
Yeah.
But once you register yourself, I think automatically you will be able to download this from the ISL website.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, there's Malit Pereira. Yes, please. Your words software. Yes, summaries. I think Dr. Kaumal tomorrow will explain to you this using these templates and software for preparing these summaries. Yes, even this Excel sheet is a manual way of doing it. Yeah, you can make use of software to prepare summaries. Yes, you can do. And Shabin, could you please describe the literature needed to explain the results and findings? Yeah, for results and findings, yeah, that is the most, the last part that I was telling to you about. That is the interpretation part comes there. Once you have observations, once you have your methods, once you have your results ready, then try to make connections with past literature, right? So that is what the discussion is all about. If you have results and discussion as two separate sections, don't ever try to relate your results to past studies in your results section. Try to interpret your observations and results in the discussion section. That's why I think most of the researchers would prefer to have results and discussion put together as one chapter, results and discussion. In that case, once you present the description of your results, you can immediately try discussing this with past literature. That is, this discussion is the interpretation of what you observe. You put, you relate your observations to the previous studies. Right, the examples the two examples that I gave you would give you some insights onto this, Sabine. The last, Amila, could you please be kind enough to elaborate on why focusing on certain topic? It is okay to have different topics. Yeah, I mean, that depends on the content of these papers. Now, even though they have different topics, there can be connections that are contained in these papers. Yes, it's up to you. If you when you go through these papers, you will find connections between these topics, right? So don't try to summarize all the papers when you read it at the first time, right? You just go through the abstract, say browse through the paper, and screen the papers, whether you want to go through them fully or not, because reading a research journal article is not that fun sometimes. It's not like reading a newspaper, right? It needs lots of energy and enthusiasm, right? So that's why I wanted you I wanted you to first go through the abstract, and if it is interesting enough, go through the full paper. Right, so don't ever make any distinction between papers. This is absolutely related to this, and this is not related to a different topic, and it is not part of this. Just go through the abstract and see whether there are connections that you can make use of. If that is the case, I mean, you can. I mean, there's no. I mean, don't ever go through just the title only and then decide whether to go through the paper or not. Always read the abstract and then decide whether to go through the paper or not. Job Praharan, how to distinguish pivotal papers in it. Yeah, that is now these pivotal papers. When you read through the papers, you will find the same paper repeatedly cited by different authors. right? And especially for methodologies, and also for in the introduction, for say development of methodologies or construction of theories, or any fundamental studies, for example, then you may see that their papers are over and over again, they are being cited. Say, for example, if you take if you are onto a slope stability, there's a person called Bishop's, right? Now Bishop's papers are always cited by many of the authors. If you go to say foundation designs, for example, Terzagh's papers published in 1960s and 70s are still being cited, right? So they are some of the pivotal papers that I'm talking to you about, right? Now I'm doing research on ecological modeling. For ecological modeling, there's a prominent researcher called Martin Scheffer. He has published lots of papers in the 90s and early 2000s. And his papers have established basic theories and methodologies, right? So sometimes you can't avoid not referring to these papers. Those are referred to as pivotal papers, right? So these papers are sometimes not journal papers. They can be standards. If you are doing some modeling studies, if you are doing some design related studies, then Eurocode or BS codes, they are also pivotal studies, right? They are also pivotal references. If you are say conducting some studies related to drinking water standards in Sri Lanka, SLA 614 is a pivotal study. Or else WHO drinking water guidelines are pivotal studies. You can't just skip them. So pivotal papers, they can be even standards or guidelines or papers, books, whatever they are, right? So the second question is, the thesis writing started and thorough decision later. Yeah, as I told you before, when you have this Excel sheet prepared, you can keep on revising that, right? That's why I always ask the students to start the literature review part right from the beginning and keeps on improving and polishing it, right? So it has to started early, and little by little you keep on reading, right? You become thorough with the past studies. In that case, you can keep on revising it. It's part of your whole research activity. And Suranga, Suranga, you are here. Could you explain the validity of development-related reports such as those from? Yeah, I think Suranga, the World Bank, ADB, or UN-related institutions, I always advise my researchers and co-workers to rely on the information of those institutions, because those publications are all peer-reviewed, and say they are prepared by experts of on that field, and they are, I think, sometimes the publications of the World Bank or the ADB or the UN agencies have more acceptability in research circles than some academic journal papers, because some academic journal papers, the review process is very weak, right? The site that I refer to, the COPE, or the Committee on Publication Ethics, it will, if you go through the guidelines given by the COPE for reviewers of journal articles, I think most of the journals, I think not many journals would fit into that authentic guidelines given by the COPE. But you know that World Bank, ADB, and other UN organizations, they have their own peer review of these articles, and they are I think they can be considered as valid and trusted information. But sometimes commercially available information is not very reliable, even though they are from big companies. Suranga, I'll talk to you separately. This layout.
There is one from Dinisha Idrivi.
So that?
There's one question from Dinisha Idrivi. In interpretive type of literature review, is it necessary to have a thorough understanding of the experiment done by the author? It's her question.
Can you please repeat that again?
Can you see in your chat box? It's
Chat
there.
box
Okay.
Can you read, if you have it
Yeah.
on your screen, can you please read that?
Yes. In interpretive type of literature review, is it necessary to have a thorough understanding of the experiment done by the author?
Yeah, I think interpretation of others' work needs a bit of experience. At least you need to have a good understanding of what others have done, and you need to have a clear understanding of what you are planning to do, right? But this interpretation will also give you some chances, some material for you to develop your own methodologies, and also to refine methodologies if you have developed your own methodologies. It's always complementary. You can interpret what others have done. If you are interpreting it to develop your own methods, yes, you can do it. But if you want to refine your methodologies based on the previous work, again, you can do it, right? But this interpretation of what others have done should be done with a focus, right? If I ask you, why do you want to interpret what others have done, then you need to have an answer, right? So I want to interpret what others have done to make sure that the methods that I have developed are good enough or scientifically valid or something like that. You need to have an answer for that. So interpretation has to be done with an objective in mind, with a focus. This Riyad Silva, I have done several R&D papers with respect to lighting and surge protection. Those who wish to share, yes, please contact Riyad for any information. Yes, Suranga, I'm very glad that you are here today. And there's one. What is referring to interpretation of it? Rasmia, what do you mean by this? What is? I don't know whether I have answered all the there are too many
questions and the greetings.
Yeah, but anyway, if you have any specific things, you can always email me. That's okay. You can always because as a researcher, I would like to extend my help. And if you, I mean, apart from literature, if you have anything to discuss on research related things, please always feel free to talk to us. I might not be able to help you, but I can guide you. I can refer your request to some others whom I have contact with. Always please feel free to contact us.
Yes, and latter part of this certificate program, you can meet Professor Manthan once again in different type in different topic. At that time also you can ask questions if you have some at that time. And so with that, actually, we
next
have
time,
taken a lot of time.
I will speak a little slower. Probably it is too fast.
No, it's not a matter actually, because even it took nearly 3 hours, but I know that you have so many things to mention. And I hope this is very informative and find all the participants find it very fruitful. And thank you so much once again for accepting our invitation. And dear participants, that tomorrow we will have another lecture on scientific writing, referencing styles. Yes, referencing styles. And so with that one, you can join to Professor Kaumal. Yeah. And so Professor Manthunka, then thank you so much. And also participants that you can register through the ISL website if you want, if you wish to get the certificate as well as to get these whatever the documents. And okay, once again, thank you so much.
Yeah,
and
thank you for inviting me. Hope to see everybody at a different forum, different.
Yes. in the same forum, same certificate program in
All right.
different
Okay.
topics. Yes. Yes.
Same program, a different lecture. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
everybody. And Ms. Panti, Engineer Panti Kanarata, thank you so much for being with us and also supporting. And also Mr. Priyanta, thank you so much. And for all participants, as well as for the IESL for hosting this program, thank you very much. Thank you. See you on tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Thank you.